As the Me Too movement is creating a space for more people to come forward with stories of sexual harassment and abuse, we've been collecting stories from our listeners for a series we're calling Us Too. This week, we hear from a woman from the Bay Area city of Fremont who's a former Jehovah's Witness. Her name is Georgia Browne, and she says she was excommunicated from the church after she reported being raped by a congregant. We've got to warn you, this story includes explicit details, so keep that in mind if you're listening with kids.
My mother was a Jehovah's Witness. She became one when I was 2 years old. I remember being very involved in the church. I was 110%. Growing up in a congregation, you're always aware that you are seen as a lesser being, that you have a position underneath men. Women have no position of authority in the congregation. When I was 23, I started dating a witness boy, and we'd go out to some dance clubs, and there was a night in particular where I had too much to drink. And then the next thing I remember was waking up when I felt my hymen break, and the pain and him on me, and I just screamed because in that second I knew everything was over. It was done. I had had sex outside of marriage, even though it wasn't my fault. And I was a woman, so any claim I made against it, it was going to be my fault. I was drunk. I remember I pulled my dress down, and I ran out of the house, and he came up and he grabbed me, and I said, "Don't touch me." And he starts crying and screaming, "I'm sorry." He eventually convinced me to go inside, saying he was going to get help, that he had a problem. But I will say, I ended up forgiving him and holding him while he was crying that night, if you can believe it. Because I knew in my head, no one was going to take my side in this. I've got to figure this out. It's a common lesson taught, like in the book, the story of Dinah. They teach about it in the Bible, about the young girl who was raped by a fella. And the whole thing they teach about that is, well, if she hadn't been there, it wouldn't have happened to her. And that puts women in the position where if they are victimized, they blame themselves. We ended up making the decision to get married. Yeah, I look back now and I'm like, bloody hell. Nobody in their right mind would do that, but I know for a fact that I was not in my right mind. You're a brainwashed individual. You'll make decisions like that. And I know that I'm not the only woman who's been in that position and made that decision. It happens, and it's still happening. And I stayed with him for a year, and the rapes continued. So in this time, I'm thinking, I want to get out of this. I need to go talk to the elders in our congregation. A group of, I think it was 4 men in their probably mid-60s, and I'm 24 years old. I'm terrified. So I'm trying to explain what has happened, and they want me to write out a letter. So I write down what I can to the best of my ability. And so they had a time where they said, well, if you're saying that your ex did these things, we need to bring him in so we can ask him to his face. And I said, no, don't. I don't want to do that, forget it. And they said, well, we need to deliberate. So I stepped outside and I went back in the room, and they let me know that they were going to disfellowship me or excommunicate me for fornication. I don't really remember walking out of the room. I remember understanding that everything I knew, everybody I'd known and loved who was in that congregation, which was basically all of my relatives, everyone I'd grown up with, was now cut off from me. I was, in their eyes, dead. And I remember there was a truck coming, and I just stepped out into the road, and I was ready to just be done. But I'll tell you what's honest to God saved me was those friends that they had warned against, those people in my life that they had said I couldn't be around. And I filed for divorce. My story isn't singular. There's so many women who have gone through the process of being Jehovah's Witnesses, whether they're still in or out, where their stories are so similar. I'm in recovery groups all the time with women telling stories, and I'm just like, oh gosh, yeah, me too, or they'll say that on my comments. When you are a victim, you make a choice. You make a choice, and it's either you're going to stay a victim or you're going to take what happened to you and you're going to learn from it. You're either going to help other people not to be in that situation, and you're going to become strong by it because you survived it. And that's what I chose. It was escape from that gave me my life.
That story was produced by KQED's senior editor, Tanya Mosley. The Jehovah's Witness Church hasn't responded to our repeated attempts for comment, but their website says while the church condemns sexual assault, it also puts the onus on the victim to ward off sexual advances. For example, the church instructs women who are in the midst of a rape to scream or put up a fight. Only then is it considered rape in the eyes of the church.